dear friends, and welcome to the second video in our series on the North Node Transit moving through Aries, the South Node Transit moving through Libra. We are going to kick on back and enjoy this leisurely overview of this Aries Libra axis and what it means to have the North Node specifically working on Aries while the South Node is working on Libra. And I also have another video on this transit that's already live on the channel. That one is a 300,000 foot view of 2019 through 2028. So the 9-year period, half of one nodal cycle. We went through stage by stage, chapter by chapter to reflect and draw out some of the themes, because these cycles, like Aries North Node cycle, for example, is not happening in isolation. It's part of a much longer, more in-depth, rich, intricate storyline. And so that video is already live on the channel. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. It's a fun little story time that you can kind of like put your own life into the timeline and see what, has been unfolding for you. And then in this video, like I said, we'll do the 30,000 foot overview, so really high level, looking at all the pieces that are at play with this transit. And then in the next video that's still coming soon at the time of recording this, hopefully when you're finding this, it's already out. Shouldn't be too long, probably closer than I think, considering this video right here, I am recording it on May 9th, 2023, and I fully expected it to be at least June when I recorded this video. And the fact that today of all days, Sun is conjunct Uranus, and I got the video, or I got the message from 3 different videos this morning to stop sleeping on it. Like, stop sleeping on it. Like, multiple different creators were saying that in the videos that I watched this morning. And what came to me was this video, that it's time for this to come out. And that did kind of provoke me a little bit in my guts, like made me squirm a little bit, because I'm like, hey, I'm not ready. And it was like a perfectionism thing, like good enough, time for the leap of faith, time to be spontaneous and act in alignment with what your drive is telling you and what feels right in the moment, regardless of what you had planned. And so that is the best teeny tiny little summary I've ever come up with as far as like how to characterize this shift between the Taurus Scorpio cycle that's just finishing up in July of 2022 is a feminine cycle, and is really getting us to the heart of like what is valuable inside of us. What do we personally hold to be the most valuable thing in the world? Like, what is at the top of that list? What is the core of value that you've uncovered through this greater unfolding and really through this most recent cycle of the Taurus North Node? It's connected us with our sense of our own inner power and inner security. And now I see us moving into this Aries North Node cycle as like the beating heart in the chest is what we got hooked up with during the Taurus cycle. And in this Aries North Node cycle, we make sure that we have the proper rib cage structure to protect that really feminine, tender, but so deeply valuable part of ourselves that we have been fortunate to hook up with during this last Taurus North Node transit. And as we carry that forward, this Aries North Node transit sparks our protective fire. And really, like that absolutely extends to others, like in our close personal families. Aries energy can be very protective, like over their spouse, their children, their close ones. But also in a realm for all of us and at a human individual level, it's talking about self-protection. And we're going to get way more into all of these things as we really do take it step by step by step. I hope you enjoy this. There are timestamps in the description. Feel free to jump around as much as you like. But without further ado, we're going to take it one chunk at a time and take our time unpacking this and exploring as a thought exercise more than anything else, just for fun. what is it that we've unearthed during these last several years as the world has, almost literally been turned upside down in a lot of ways? There's a brand new paradigm emerging. We're living history right now, and we doing our own individual work in our own individual safe space inside of ourselves with that tender heart and the protective rib cage around it. We all have that inner work to do. And with this transit, it's like each person doing that is building this bigger picture that, if you watched the first video in the series, really is that North Node through Aquarius conjunct Pluto in Aquarius turning point, where everything that we're doing that is satisfying to us, that stokes our passions, that connects us with our inner fire and our sense of self respect, our sense of dignity and honor, that we are valuable creatures and that we have something to add. The more we can get lined up with our individual sense of value and purpose and mission in this world, whatever that is that like feels like it speaks directly to your soul, the more we can do that, the more we can be living that path here later on in the 2020s when we do get to some of these later transits where it really does become, it's so fascinating because it really is for the good of the collective. But how do you get there? You need the individuals to be living as themselves. You need the individuals to be fully empowered and living their individual path no matter what anybody else is doing. And who is that for? It's for everyone. So it's this dynamic of the individual and the collective, and where do those two things come together? And I think this transit of the North Node through Aries, more than any of these other ones, it's really like breaking us free from whatever the old paradigm was. We've been years now since the global pandemic at the time of recording this in 2023. Like, we've been in this in between space where it's very clear that the old kind of is never coming back and that we live in this new normal. And honestly, I personally get really excited about that. My energy is very supportive for spaces where there's a blank canvas, where there's like open-endedness, and we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen and what the new form looks like, but we get to help create it. We get to help make it what it's going to be. It's not some random thing that is like a random number generator going to just spit something out. It's going to be the amalgamation of every individual's individual journey on this planet. No pressure, but you're kind of important. So, this is the cycle where we really get to step into how important our individual life is in this bigger picture of what's unfolding for the collective. Okay, so this cycle of the Aries North Node and the Libra South Node starts in this most current version, July 17th, 2023 through January 11th, 2025. So each of these chapters, as the North Node makes its way around, is 18 months long. That's standard across the zodiac. And this particular chapter, the last time that this uh, took place, this exact cycle of the Aries North Node and the Libra South Node, was December 25th, 2004 through June 22nd of 2006. And so just going to pause right here for a second and take a step back to where were you in your unfolding at that time, the December '04 through June of '06. And while you do that, I highly recommend some journaling, some reflection, some, taking that in on a car trip or something and unpack it a little bit and see what happened, because holy moly, like it's like a grand finale, like a big reveal, this North Node going through Aries, because the nodes are normally moving in a retrograde, aka backwards motion. They are the only thing that start in Pisces and end in Aries. That's like the end of this 18-year cycle, is this next chapter. And then we'll have North Node go through Pisces, and that'll be the beginning of this next 18 and a half year cycle. So we're getting to see the culmination of who we have become. And it's a very like pulling back the veil kind of moment on, we've been becoming it so incrementally as we go through each of these individual 18-month chapters. We work on this little bit and we get this improvement, and we work on this little bit and we get that improvement. And it's like all hunky dory along the way. But then at the end, you get to kind of stand back and see, like, okay, so what has all of that added up into? And it's like life gets to show you who you are by presenting the circumstances. And in my experience, and I'm going to tell my story just to maybe help spur some extra details in your own reflection. But for me, December '04 through June of '06 was the middle of my junior year of high school through the end of my high school. So I graduated high school in May of '06. And so on into June. I keep bumping you. She's okay. She doesn't mind. So that I had to check I was recording with the right thing. Um, so at that time, like what was going on for me, like being an upperclassman and finishing high school and kind of getting to be the the bigger fish in the little pond kind of thing. Because like when you're a freshman or even in middle school, like I felt very teeny tiny and so inadequate in my confidence. And as these chapters went, like that Taurus North Node chapter that happened when I was a sophomore, junior, that was huge for my confidence, same as this has been. Like, it just gives me this sense of inner security, like knowing within myself that I am doing a good job, that I am good, that I don't even have to be good, as my life coach would tell me, like, you don't even have to be good. You can be bad. Like, what is even good and bad? These are such valuable questions that have been so freeing during this Taurus North Node cycle. And I do remember that, like, that era of my high school career was equally beneficial in building up my confidence. And so then, as an upperclassman, I was kind of involved in some aspects, the pieces that I wanted to be doing. I was kind of involved in FFA, and that's where I was doing my parliamentary procedure, which is part of how I practice my public speaking. And then I was also doing prepared public speaking through FFA and using that as an arena to hone my craft as a speaker. And so my FFA advisor, he what the heck was that? Oh, this one over here, this Christmas cactus. I have such a hard time watering it the way that it wants to be watered. It keeps spitting its leaves off. Um, so my advisor in FFA, he pulled me aside. It was like the middle of my senior year, and he told me that you have to run for state office in FFA. And this is something that in Kansas you have to wait until you graduate high school, and then you're eligible to run during your like freshman year of college and your sophomore year of college. Those are the people that they can pull from for candidates to be state officers. And I looked at him like he was freaking insane, because why would I do that? Why? I haven't been a chapter officer. I haven't been a district officer. I wasn't a green hand officer. I don't want to. Why? Why? What gives you this idea? And he's like, I don't know. There's just something about it. You really need to think about this. And so I started thinking about it and had mostly decided that, yeah, no, I don't see the point in that. And he basically convinced me to do it. Like, as much as I want to say it was my idea and I didn't need to be like pulled along or whatever, that's kind of what ended up happening. Like, he really sold it to me. Like, he did a sales job as far as like it's not about getting elected. It's not even about necessarily like being a state officer. It's about the process and taking advantage of the rich opportunity that even going through the process of being a candidate would mean. Like, to be a candidate meant that you're going to get multiple rounds of interviews. And at the main round of interview, right before the actual election, you go through a 3-day process where they ask you 100 behavioral based interview questions. Those are like, tell me about a time that you overcame a challenge, and you're supposed to tell them a story. And so you have to answer 100 of those questions in front of the same panel of 10 people over a 3-day period. So you practiced a lot on having lots of different examples that you could pull from, so that you every single time wasn't like, well, so I had this job at this grocery store, and then the next time, so my grocery store job, and then the next time, so my grocery store job, like 100 times. You have so many examples that you practice telling those stories so that you can answer the questions in an interesting way. And so he sold it to me like, look at how much practice you're going to get at interviewing, at speaking, at, because he knew that was my jam. Like, I was all about prepared public speaking. That was my main thing. And I only did parla because you got to debate, and that was just little mini speeches that you got to practice making them up on the spot. And so, yeah, like he knew that was my thing. And so he totally baited the hook with exactly what was speaking my language, which was, you're going to get practice at speaking. You're going to get practice at talking in front of people. You're going to get practice, like if you get slated. Right. So that 3-day interview process yields a slate of 10 candidates. There were 22 in my round. So 22 of us go in, and they pick the 10 who are the top of the class or whatever. And they put this slate out there, and that lets the delegates, there's like however many delegates, few hundred, I think, 2 from each chapter in the state. And so a few hundred delegates, high school students, are the ones that actually vote on the slate of officer candidates. And if you're on the slate, that means that you're going to give your little like 2.5 to 3 minute speech, your candidate speech, in front of the whole auditorium, which is like 1,500 people. So that was why I was there. And that's why I tell that whole long story, is because I wanted to be on the slate, because if I could give my speech on stage at McCain Auditorium in front of 1,500 people, that would be the largest audience I've ever gotten to speak in front of, and I want that. I want that experience. And so he was very clear with me about like, don't you want this? Don't you want this one little thing? And because I was open to like, I'm not even trying to get elected. I'm trying to practice my craft. I'm trying to like get better at being a leader, get better at like doing my public speaking thing and pulling from my experience and turning it into something that can not only light the way for myself, but that can light the way for other people too, maybe. Like, I've had these aspirations since I was very small. Check out my video, or no, my podcast episode, Patience. There's a link for it in the description box. I talk about the 28-year journey that I've been on so far to become a professional public speaker, and how I would gladly stay on this journey for the rest of my life and not ever make any money at it, because this is just what I feel like I was born to do. And so that's what he baited the hook with, and that got me to run for state office. And so June 2nd of 2006, right before this Aries North Node Transit was over, I got elected as the state sentinel for the Kansas FFA for the year 2006 to 2007. And I served in that position, which meant that I got a scholarship, a very small one, to Kansas State University. And that is why I went to college. I was not going to go. I don't want to go. I'm so done with school. I want out of here. I want my freedom. I've done the school thing. I'm ready for something different. I was going to go to cosmetology school, because that's only like a year, maybe 2, depending on what all you're going to do. And I was going to learn how to cut hair, and then I was going to start cutting hair, and that's what I was going to do with my 20s, I guess. I don't know how long I thought that was going to go on. And then my advisor pulled me aside, and he told me, okay, great about the cosmetology thing, but at least run for state office and see what happens. And so, because of the whole process of applying for state office, you also had to apply to K State, so that if you do get elected, you're going to be accepted there and you can start going to college or whatever. And I was like, yeah, whatever, here you go. And I was not going to go because I had no expectations for getting elected. And then I got on the slate. It's like a whole thing. It's an amazing story, and not just for the fun of it. I'm really going to tell you the slow version, because it was one of the most exhilarating moments of my life to stand backstage with the 22 of us that a month before that, we did our first round of interviews, and like they were more practice ones. And then we did the 3-day process of like 12-hour days of being together and going through this like very exhausting process all together. We're all about the same age, same point in our lives. And standing backstage in the dark with all of them and these instructions about how this next thing where they're going to announce the slate, how this is going to go down, is the current state officers. So the people who are just finishing their term, like the Sentinel, for example, he's there and he's ready to, on either side of him, the two candidates who get slated as Sentinel are going to step forward and he's gonna grab their arms and he's gonna run with them out to the chairs that they're gonna sit in. And by the end of this process, all 10 of us candidates are gonna be seated in our chairs in our pairs of like these two are slated as Sentinel, and these two are slated as reporter, and these two are slated as treasurer, and these two are on and on and on. So there's 10 of us seated on stage at the end of this. That's what we're about to do. And so we're all standing in this big huddle of the 22 of us, and you can't go through that whole process and not want to be elected. like at the beginning, I didn't care. I just wanted to be on the slate so that I could like give my speech on stage. And by that point, I was all in. I wanted it. I wanted this experience. I wanted to be a state officer. I wanted like all of the different experiences that would entail for my life. College, yes, but everything, all the leadership development that went into those state officers and like all the different speaking opportunities, all the different leadership opportunities, all the networking with everybody else who had gone through that path of being a state officer. Like it's a portal into all of these different opportunities. And so by the time I had gotten to that moment, June 2nd, standing backstage, I wanted it. And the first position that they announced was the Sentinel, and your candidates for 2006, 2007 state Sentinel are Carly Wharton and I mean, I was the first name they said, and I stepped forward and he ran us on stage, and it was incredible the high that moment was. And so now you're sitting on stage, and now it's time to give your speech. And she was first, and she was very, very, very in shock. Like you could tell it was almost like a crisis of worthiness at that moment where she was so in shock that she was even sitting in that chair, that she was so emotional. And as she gave her speech, like she was so choked up through the whole thing that it wasn't smooth. And I had seen her give it just like 2 days before, and she rocked it. Like she was awesome at that speech, but the emotion of the moment was just intense for her. And yeah, like it kind of sucked her under a little bit. And again, I say that because at the end of the day, like I felt like when they announced that it's her versus me, she had been a district officer for like a couple years. She'd been a chapter officer for a few years. Like we all got to know each other really well. So like then you see who you're paired against. I'm like, I don't stand a chance, but I get to give my speech on the stage. I'm so excited. And so I got up there. Oh God, you better believe, like I was born for this. Like I was born for this moment. I've been practicing my public speaking on purpose since I was 7 years old, and here I am at 17, almost 18 years old, 11 years later, and I this is what I've been working towards. Like I had a laser focus in that moment. And later, the I got elected, obviously, you heard that part. Later, this was like a year, 2 years later, the person who ran the committee, but, like, behind the scenes that, like, did the electing and, like, counted the votes and, like, got the little envelopes ready of, like, who won out of all of this, um, she told me that they counted those votes, like, 3 different times because they just couldn't believe that somebody who had no reputation, no experience being an officer of any kind, had no resume, basically, for leadership. On that speech, I got, like, 90% of the votes. In those 2 minutes, I won my election, and I'm hearing this uh, quote that is, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And what we have been doing this whole entire cycle between the Pisces North Node last time and, now 18 and a half years later, we're having this final chapter of the Aries North Node. Um, we're going to get to see this actualization of self again, where life is going to hold up a mirror to you and say, do you see what you've become? Like, I didn't know what my speech would be. I just knew, like, I want that experience. I want to sit in those chairs. I want to be handed this microphone. And I mean, I had lived that moment over and over and over and over and over. So when I'm now holding the microphone, I am just like, I was so calm in the moment that, like, again, I killed that speech and won by a landslide. And that catapulted my life in a very different direction, right? Like, I went to college, I graduated from college, I went immediately into graduate school, which obviously also wouldn't have happened. And then when I finished graduate school, then I moved to Dallas, Texas to work at a software company and, like, then leave that to become an entrepreneur. And now I own two grocery stores. It's not the straightest of lines, but it all started because somebody worked on me to convince me that going after this thing, taking this risk, putting myself out there, running for state office, yeah, it's a risk. Like, I could do the whole thing and then not get elected. I could be disappointed. I could get my hopes up and then be disappointed. Or, or it could be the moment that you were born for. That, like, everything that you've been doing has been leading to this moment. That's what's possible in this transit. And I, for one, am really looking forward to it. So, sister signs. We are all 12 of the zodiac archetypes. And so the 12 zodiac archetypes that make up every single person's natal chart, makes up the sky above us, those 12 signs are paired into sister sign combinations. And those are the two signs that are always across from each other in the zodiac. So in this case, Aries and Libra are sister signs. These pairs, these functional pairs, represent oppositions where if you carry them in your natal chart, and the North Node South Node axis is an axis, so like it automatically represents an opposition. Oppositions are one of the most uncomfortable configurations to have in your natal chart because they feel like they're pulling you in two completely opposite directions. Where, like, I can't go north and go south at the same time. Like, in the 3D, in the land of physics, it's impossible to move in two different directions at the same time. And so that's the pulling and the tearing that an opposition can feel like before you figured out how to balance those, how to bring them into balance and not go this way or that way, but turn them both this way. And now we're moving forward like this. And now we're covering an even greater breadth and depth and width and complexity and richness that we're capable of because we have both of these energies working together as a pair. And so while oppositions can be one of the most uncomfortable, I also personally believe that they're one of the most powerful configurations to have in your natal chart because it's unifying, it's harmonizing, it's forcing you to figure out how to open up to receiving the best of both worlds. So when we look at these opposites, they are archetypal opposites. And what do I mean by that? It means that in some ways, these archetypes, they attract each other. So like it's common for like Tauruses and Scorpios or Aries and Libras to like have this attraction towards each other kind of because the other one, that other energy represents the what I'm not really capable of. Like I see a grace and a beauty inside the other one's directness where I'm more passive, or on the flip side, like I wish I could be more diplomatic like this other person. I'm so direct and harsh, or like whatever it is. Like there's this attraction to the other one has, like what I've, always been baffled by. On that same exact coin, though, and I would say which side you land on depends on your own personal frequency, there's also this repulsion between the two because Aries wants to do it like this and Libra wants to do it like this. And if both of those are fixed in their like kind of egoic need and egoic attachment to having it their way, that nobody, like, this one's going this way, this one's going this way, and now we're back into the pulling thing. And so there's this repulsion that's like, I don't like their way, I like it my way. So balancing an opposition is no small task. And every single one of these nodal chapters, between the North Node being in one sister sign and the South Node being in the other one, we're also not exactly, they're not exactly created equal, if we can say that, to like pull on a Libra term here with equality. They're not exactly created equal when we have the North and South Node as the activator of that sister sign combo, because the South Node represents where have we overdeveloped, where are we overindulging in a certain energy, and the North Node shows where we're underdeveloped in a certain energy. And so if you look at your natal chart with your own personal South Node placement, North Node placement, I referenced in the first video that that's kind of like the spinal cord of your own personal karma. So like your personal South Node represents where are you the most overdeveloped, and your personal North Node represents where are you the most underdeveloped. And so maybe this is your nodal return, maybe meaning you're a natal Aries North Node. So maybe like all the time you have this Aries North Node configuration. So like the things that we're going to talk about in this video, it's like your whole life is one giant Aries North Node chapter. Whatever your North Node is, though, for you, you can be sure that that is the least developed part of your energy. And that's why it's pointing you right there. It's pointing you to the edge of your comfort zone and beyond. And that is really where the North Node and Aries energy in general have a really beautiful harmony to them. They both really want the same thing as far as like finding that leading, sometimes bleeding edge of who were you born to be? Who did you come here to become? Not who were you before or who you were in your childhood or any of that. Aries does not give two shits about the past at all. Very right now and looking forward to like the next immediate right now and like, what do I want in this kind of space? And so letting go of the old stories and being willing to inhabit whatever new form it is that is wanting to be released, to bring into balance this Libra energy when we have the South Node there, can be very overly concerned with what other people want, with what is in harmony with the group, with what's diplomatic and proper and appropriate. Those are kind of like where we can get our own individual self lost in trying to be fair to other people. We can lose track of what's fair to us. And so these are just a couple of the pieces to do with the sister sign combo. We're going to look in depth, though, at the whole cycle overall and each of these individually. But to get kind of, again, a real story to really ground us in here for what I think the gist of the energy of an Aries North Node cycle, what it's doing. So to tell this story, I'm going to look back a little bit to March of 2023 to the Aries new moon solar eclipse. So this is very much like foreshadowing, right? Like happening at the very tail end of Aries where the North Node is about to enter. It's foreshadowing what is it that is wanting to open up in your life. And so what happened on the Aries solar eclipse new moon for me was that, nothing too crazy, but as I'm going to get in my car, I had like a whole stack of like my laptop and my notebook and my phone is like all kind of stacked up, and I have it here in my arm. And as I go to get in my car, my phone falls out and lands face down. And as I like go to pick it up, I'm like, please don't be broken, please. Ah! Totally shattered and useless. Like now I obviously need a new phone. And so I get the new phone, long story short, I get the new phone and I go to take a shower for the first time with the new phone, and my shower like routine is that I hook my phone to this like Bluetooth speaker that I have that projects the sound so that I can hear it still really well and kind of crank some tunes while I'm in the shower. And I got my new phone and I'm go to hook it to the speaker, and it's like the first time I'm trying to pair these devices, and it's like searching for devices. Like it doesn't find that this speaker even exists. It like will not find the device so that I can pair them. And finally, I'm like, whatever, okay? I'm just gonna play the music, and if I can't hear it, oh well, I guess today's shower is supposed to be music free. No big deal. And so I get in the shower and the music starts playing, and not on the speaker, on the phone. And what I discover is that the speaker on the phone, my new phone, is like twice as loud as the speaker that was on my old phone. And so now I don't even need the Bluetooth speaker. I don't need to pair with the Bluetooth speaker because my speaker on my new phone is good enough to project its own sound. So now all in one. Like this little device here is self-sufficient and no longer needs the support, the secondary function of another team member. You know, like I had this routine that required my phone and the speaker to be a team to give me this experience of this surround sound during my shower. And now the phone is capable of doing it by himself and does not need the speaker. And this is what I'm seeing as far as like this blossoming of Aries energy, where this self sufficiency, self respect, seeing what you're really capable of automatically means that, you know, any of your relationships that are being held together by dependence, you know, like in Jan Spiller's book, I'm pretty sure is where she talked about this in the Aries North Node chapter, where like if if you have a relationship, let's say, with someone because you don't drive, and for whatever reason you don't drive, and then you have these people who are your like ride friends, right? Like these are the people that you call when you need a ride somewhere. And then let's say you have this like huge expansion and you figure out how to drive, or now you have the money for a car, or you get hypnotized and now your phobia of driving goes away. I don't know. Whatever happens, that now you're going to be a driver and you're going to have your own vehicle, your own mode of transportation. It's gonna become obvious real quick which of your ride friends were only in your life because they were giving you rides, and which one of them is a relationship that exists outside of that simple dependency where I need help with this, and so that's why this person is in my life. Like, what if you're totally self sufficient? What if you don't need help? What if you personally can take care of everything that you need in your life? At that point, who stays? Who's still there? And those are your soul tribe. Those are the people that we really want to try to find anyway, right? Like I think so. I don't know. I personally am not a huge fan of people needing me. I would much rather they want to be around me. But that's just me, you know? Like everybody's free to look at it however they like. So I do think that that is, again, a nice little summary of what this Aries North Node energy, Libra South Node energy, like the releasing on the relationship side, releasing of the need to pair with another. We no longer need to do that because now we're capable of whatever it is by ourselves. Aries North Node, Libra South Node. So July 2023 through January 2025, I I know that this is bringing overarching themes of self-actualization and this contemplation around inner balance versus outer balance, where Libra very much relates to the outer balance side, where, like, within Aries and Libra, we have Aries the self and Libra the other. So, on that Libra South Node side, it's like we're seeing the toxic ends of our old relationship patterns, our old patterns for relating to other people through need based exchanges where, again, yeah, I need you to do this for me. I can't do it for myself. I'm depending on you to show up and do it for me. those paradigms are coming to an end. And that outer balance, or finding balance by forcing balance between these external people, this group of people, that again, any amount of that is becoming less and less practical, less and less effective. And what we're leaning into then on the other side is this sense of inner balance, this sense of, instead of balancing with the other people, balance the various bits and bobs of who you are, the different facets of yourself. Instead of finding harmony with another, find harmony inside yourself, such that no matter what anybody else is doing, you're good to go. You know, we have our own back covered. Like this piece came out of Jan Spiller's Aries South Node chapter. But like when you have over exaggerated Aries energy, it's like this hyper focus on the self. And like that is traumatically induced through past lifetimes, if you go there with karmic astrology, as far as where we've been in our past lifetimes. But it's like traumatically induced through battle conditions or war conditions, where when you stopped focusing on yourself, you left yourself vulnerable to an attack, and there was nobody else there to protect you. And so an Aries South Node is very much coming to this lifetime to learn how to take the focus off of the self and open it up onto other people. That's if that's in your natal chart, and that's when, 9 years from now, when we're going to go through the next Aries South Node cycle. But for this time, it's like the hyper focus and the toxic attention is on the other. It's on trying to harmonize with what the other person is doing and constantly being a puppet on the strings of what other people are doing. And in this transit, I just saw we are snipping those strings, and nobody else's behavior, nobody else showing up or not showing up is going to mess with our inner peace. That's something that is not pullable by another person. And that brings me to this question of, are you singing melody or harmony in your life? And this is kind of a broad question. And if you're not familiar, which I really don't know that much about music, other than to know melody is kind of like the main little fragment of music that like really sets the song, kind of the backbone of the song, like the melody. And then you might bring in other elements and other pieces to harmonize with the melody and kind of add depth and flavor and richness to the sound that you're creating. And there's this song called Life is What You Make It by Graham Colton. And the lyrics of that song I absolutely love. He says, basically, find your melody and we'll join in harmony. Oh, life's what you make it. And that brings me to the playlist that's down in the description box. I'm going to tie in a lot of songs during this video, and I have them all on a Spotify playlist for you that's called Need a Little Extra, because sometimes we need just a little bit of a push, a little bit of a boost. And that one's on there, that Life is What You Make It. So definitely check that out. So another piece of the Aries Libra combo is that they are both what's called cardinal energy. So the three modalities are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And the cardinal signs are Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, and they begin each season. So Aries is the beginning of spring, Libra is the beginning of fall in the northern hemisphere, Cancer, Capricorn, summer and winter. So the beginning of things, the beginning of starting something new that doesn't exist yet. So like Aries quite literally relates to birth, and like you think about like a little baby bird who just hatched out of its egg and now it's squawking about being hungry and wanting a worm. And like new life is risky and vulnerable and needing protection and needing support, needing help, maybe that Libra side, but the raw components of life itself is there in the beating heart. and getting back to the core ember of our divine essence is what this Aries North Node transit is all about. And I believe the cardinality of it is very much like I described through, my state officer story. It's like going through an experience that doesn't just begin, 1 year. It wasn't just like, oh, 2006, 2007, like I'm a state officer, that's the impact of that event. No, like the impact of that event is the rest of my life. And so going through things during this transit that begin huge chapters of things that we did not think that we were capable of, that we never would have pictured for ourselves, taking huge leaps forward in the self that we are actualizing in the world. Good job, Carly. So when we look at cardinal fire, you think about like the beginning of a fire is a spark. And how do you get a spark? You need friction. So to get a fire, you need a spark, you need friction, you need the resistance that creates that friction. And between the friction, between the rub point, you have ignition. You have a burst of life force energy that comes forward. And that cardinal fire, it is a burst. Aries isn't a long-term energy. Like Leo energy is the fixed fire sign. And that is like a fire that burns and burns and burns and burns and burns, where Aries energy is the spark that starts that fire that burns and burns and burns and burns and burns. So it's a very short-lived, you got to strike while the iron is hot kind of thing. And then you flip that to the Libra side of cardinal air, and like, where does air begin? Fresh air, fresh perspectives and ideas. Um, Loving up in the air contemplations, like where there's just all of these different options and things floating around in the air, and we just get to kind of like, I'm seeing like a giant ball pit where we're just like swimming around inside all of these different ideas and perspectives and facets. And again, because the South Node is on that end, it's like endless swimming in all of those facets and not quite enough having the friction with the right counterpart to spark the ignition that your soul is ready for at this time. And so we can trust that with the North Node on that cardinal fire sign, there's probably going to be just a little bit of extra friction. There's going to be a little bit of extra resistance to help create that ignition, a little bit of extra push. Like even in my advisor's case, it wasn't so much friction, though he was challenging what I wanted. I wanted to go to cosmetology school. He pushed back on that idea and offered his own idea. And I love that story for this transit because, leaning into our cardinal fire, leaning into our primal life force energy can sound like, the answer is going to come from inside of you. You got to listen to like your own internal intuition or whatever. But this world, we're all in this together. Like the idea that comes that ultimately is the right avenue for the actualization of yourself doesn't necessarily mean that others aren't going to be a part of that. Like he played his part, and that's where I do want to loop back around to kind of like the highest frequency of the Libra South Node, because another half of the South Node piece is that, yes, it brings with you kind of the bad side of being overdeveloped in that area, but that's really a matter of how far do you take it, because before you take it too far, the upside to being really developed in that area is that you do have the capacity to cooperate with other people. And in that cooperation with other people, new things become possible that we are not capable of by ourselves. So the high frequency of the South Node in Libra is that it really brings to light divine teamwork, divine balancing, where somebody else may have the right idea, not you. Like my advisor in that situation, like he saw a path forward for me that actualized my soul better than what I could see. And so, like, even though the North Node is going through Aries, and that's like really lean into your inner self and your inner intuition, your inner knowing, all of that still stands true. But that's not to say don't listen to anybody else. So I think you get what I'm saying there. So Libra and Aries, another descriptor that they share is that they are both masculine signs. They're both masculine energy, considered that because they're air and fire, and those are considered to be the more masculine of all of the zodiac, versus earth and water are considered to be the feminine signs. So, most recently, we had the South Node of our masculine cycles. Most recently, we had the South Node go through fire by going through Sagittarius, and the North Node went through Gemini. And so now, we just are finishing up the Taurus Scorpio cycle, which is the feminine cycle. And now we're headed back into another masculine cycle. But this time we have the North Node through fire going through Aries and the South Node going through air. So it's kind of the opposite of what we had happen in 2020, where the prescription was really to receive and listen and be open to everybody else's ideas, everybody else's life story, everybody else's perspective and vantage point. And by doing that, that we would come to see our own beliefs differently. We would evolve our belief structure in a positive way. And this time, like I just got done explaining, like it's not that we're trying to cut everybody off, but really the first voice in the room and the last voice in the room both need to be our inner voice. And that is really the source of information that holds the most value for us. Either that inner voice is going to be convinced, like my advisor, he got the job done. He baited the hook with the right thing, and he was able to show me what's in it for me, to the point where my inner voice was like, yeah, that's a good deal. You should do that. There's no downside to that. So even if somebody else brings it, that's okay. But them just saying that that's a good idea and you should do it, that's where, how much is your inner voice making that decision versus how much are you trusting the lead of somebody else? And that's the part where it is important to make sure that it is truly your idea, it's truly your decision, that you want that for your life. I'm reminded here of something my mom used to say to me when I was little, that, and she still does, um, that I'm so grateful for, even though, especially the younger I was, I really was very frustrated by her telling me this. She's an Aries South Node, by the way. So she's one of those that's like hyper focused on herself and not really trusting other people in her Libra North Node ness. Um, but every time I would go to her over my life, which wasn't many times, I'm a pretty self sufficient individual, but when I did go to her, it was usually because I was at the end of my ability to reason through what I was doing, and like I really needed help. And so I needed her to weigh in on my decision when I would go to her. And every single time, not one time did she give me advice. Not one time did she even say the words, well, if I was in your position, here's what I would do. Like, she refused to tell me anything about what she would do, because her point was, you're the one that has to live with it. Nobody else is going to live with what you decide here other than you. And so you are responsible for this decision. And this is her telling me, like, as a 10-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as a 27-year-old, like on and on and on. Like, she's telling me, like, this is not my decision. This is your decision. You need to decide this because you have to live with it. And that's a very empowered place to be, to accept responsibility for the decisions of your life. That's a very empowered place to be. It's also a very vulnerable place to be, because, like, what if it doesn't work out? Who am I going to blame when this doesn't work out? When it blows up in my face, who's my scapegoat? Nobody. You. You chose. You made a decision. The consequences were whatever the consequences were, and whether it's a harvest of millions of dollars or life in jail, like, we reap the harvest of what we sow. Nobody else, whether they influence our decisions or not, is going to reap the harvest of what we sow. We are. So, us being good with the choices that we're making, with the ways that we're choosing to navigate our lives, we need to be in right relationship with that. And I could see very easily that kind of the downside of if we have been outsourcing our decisions, that there are going to be powerful reckonings, like just over and over, like just slapping you over and over, powerful reckonings of consequences showing up in your life that are saying, here's why that decision was wrong. Here's the like kind of the damage that that decision led to, and like having it brought to your attention. And you're going to go, well, because so and so told me, and the consequence isn't going to care. The consequence will be non-transferable consequences to the decisions that you personally made, regardless of who influenced that decision or not. Karma doesn't care. You threw the ball, it bounced back at you. She told me to throw the ball. You're the one that's going to get hit by it. So you be the one that's satisfied with the decisions that you're making. Take my mom's advice. You got to sleep at night with your own decisions. Don't let anybody tell you what's right for you. Be the one making that choice for yourself. And that is the smoothest that this transit can go. The other piece that I want to bake in here, again, just to kind of lay the groundwork so you can do your own thought exercise around your own timeline, but Aries energy is kind of a star player of these early 2000s, where there have been Aries transits that have already wrapped up. I'm going to tell you about a couple of those. There's one that's ongoing right now, and there are a couple that are coming here for the rest of the 2020s and on into the decades beyond. So again, this Aries North Node chapter of this, like really stepping into being responsible for ourselves, is being supported by a lot of other cosmic energy that has been moving and is going to move through the sign of Aries. So I'm going to put these up on the screen and just kind of take them one at a time. So Uranus worked through Aries from May of 2010 through March of 2019, so about 9 years. And that really shook things up. It completely did a lot like what the North Node is talking about, where non-transferable consequences, and consequences is not a dirty word. It can be a good thing, where again you received the rewards of places where you have taken personal responsibility, where you are leaning into your intuition, and then there were rewards of ways that you're being brought opportunities to step even further into who it was that you were being born to become. We have Chiron transiting Aries, and that one is currently ongoing. It started in April of 2018 and continues through Aries through April of 2027, with a little bit of an in and out there at the end where it moves between Aries and Taurus. So about 9 years of Chiron in Aries. And quick fun fact, Chiron has, what is that called? Chiron has an orbit that is inconsistent. That's not the word I was looking for. If you know what I'm talking about, comment below. I would love to hear. But if you know what I'm thinking, please tell me. Uh, so Chiron has an orbit that's inconsistent, meaning it stays in some signs longer than it stays in other signs. So Chiron in Aries and Pisces are the two signs that it spends the most time in. And then on the flip side of that, exactly opposite to that, are Virgo and Libra, and that's the signs that it spends the least amount of time in. So just because of it spending longer, more years in these two signs, Pisces and Aries, there's a bigger chunk of the population who have Chiron in those two signs, and it's a lot more rare to have Chiron in Libra or Chiron in Virgo because it only spends about a year going through those signs. So it's harder to come during that window just because the window is so much shorter. So, anyways, lots of people on the planet right now are going through their Chiron return. Meaning they're having their wounds, their wounded healer is becoming more healed, is becoming more versed in their own forms and sources of medicine. That each of us have these inner wounds, and we all have to learn how to soothe and heal whatever unique wounds it is that we have within us. And that Chiron in Aries is really a wound at the sense of like the core of who you are. It's like the bathtub drain being open and like no amount of self-esteem building in the world gets you self-esteem. It's like every time you build up some self-esteem, it like drains right back out. And so the process of becoming empowered and being able to hold yourself in a position and a posture of dignity and self-respect and knowing that you bring value to the table day in, day out, you know that to be true. With Chiron and Aries, that's just, it's like a slipperier reality that it's just harder to latch on to our sense of self-worth and self-respect with Chiron and Aries. And so we're all, for these 9 years, this April 2018 through April 2027, we are all undergoing this process of fortifying inside of ourselves our sense of self, our sense of self-worth, that even when other people say you don't deserve that, we know that we do. We have this air of our own divine essence that says we exist and therefore we deserve, we have a right to whatever it is that we desire because we exist, because we're here. It's that simple. There's nothing to earn, there's nothing to, no hoops to jump through, there's no thresholds, minimum requirements that you have to meet in order to be worthy of what it is that you desire. We all are worthy simply because we exist. And so that is what we're learning and practicing during this Chiron moving through Aries transit these 9 years. And then kind of like right here in the middle, more towards the latter half, we have the North Node going through Aries. So I see that as being a real culmination point of what it is that we've been healing. And again, I see it as this like stepping forward into manifesting something that like you did not know you could do this. You did not know you were capable of this thing. And then you manifested it and you like get the microphone handed to you and you're like, damn, I was born for this. Like that is what I feel coming, especially for, most of us in the spiritual community, we try our best to take really good care of ourselves. And we do a pretty good job of taking care of ourselves all day, every day. Like, we're not trying to be perfect. Nobody's advocating for that. But, like, to realize that we really have healed a lot in these last several years, especially since Chiron entered Aries in April of 2018. And that healing that we have done is going to be manifesting into more of the healer space. Like, okay, so now that you've worked with your own personal wounds this intimately and you've made such strides in closing those gaps, healing those wounds that you personally have, I see the North Node crossing over Chiron, bringing us opportunities to help others who are healing in those same ways still, where we have deep compassion and empathy for the pain that they're in because we've been there, and sharing that medicine that we've been able to cultivate in whatever way feels good for us. The next transit we'll talk a little bit about is Jupiter going through Aries. And at the time of recording this on May 9th, 2023, this one is still ongoing. It's May 2022 was the very first time Jupiter entered Aries, and it just stepped in and then did a transit back into Pisces through a retrograde, and then entered back into Aries at the tail end of 2022, and then has raced across the entire sign of Aries in about 5 months. So end of December 2022 through May 16th of 2023 is when it's going to tip on into Taurus. And that is so auspicious because we have the North Node coming to the very beginning of Taurus as it ends its Taurus chapter, readying for its Aries chapter. And you have Jupiter that just ran through Aries. And those two are going to meet up in the very beginning of Taurus. In the very first couple degrees of Taurus, Jupiter and the North Node are going to connect and have a meeting. They have a meeting around every 10, 11 years, I'm guessing, right in there. If you know exactly, tell us in the comments. But the North Node and Jupiter are going to connect once in a decade kind of transit, and it's happening at the first degrees of Taurus. Right before Jupiter's going to spend a year going through Taurus and retrograding through Taurus, and then some more through Taurus. It's going to be a full year of Jupiter and Taurus. But right after that conjunction of Jupiter and the North Node, in July, that's when the North Node is going to enter on into Aries, and it's going to start going back over all of this space where Jupiter just tore open the sky and like took the lid off of so many different things and really raised our expectation level of like the beauty and the far out nature of what is possible. And so then the North Node is going to transit that same territory over the next 18 months. And I see that as being kind of what Jupiter got stirred up and got started. The North Node is going to be coming along and adding to, kind of watering those seeds, and we're going to start to see some new things sprout up in our life. And the upcoming transits are Neptune and Saturn. So Neptune in March of 2025, so remember the North Node is going to be done in Aries in January of 2025. It'll enter Pisces. So kind of the same thing. The North Node and Neptune are going to meet up at the tail end of Pisces to have one of their meetings. That's only every 16 years or so. And that's just before, a couple months before, the North Node's going to do its process through Aries, and it's going to bring all of that awesome growth and expansion, and it's going to come tell it to Neptune. And they're going to have a little meeting where they're going to like trade, right? Because the North Node's going to go back where Neptune came from, and Neptune's going to go forward towards where the North Node came from. So they're going to have this exchange where Neptune's going to step into Aries in March of 2025, and the North Node will go on through Pisces. And so Neptune in Aries is a time of fighting for what your soul is telling you to fight for. It's definitely a tumultuous time. It's pulling the veil back on what is trying to become, what are the wars worth waging, and in kind of this like higher, more grandiose kind of battle of good versus darkness, light versus darkness, good versus evil. I personally don't I have a different kind of relationship, I think, than most people to these concepts where I think light and dark is really just a matter of the polarity of the 3D realm, where we need that. We need the contrast between the two. We need the polarity of the North Pole and the South Pole in order for the Earth to spin and for us to have weather and sun on multiple parts of the planet so we can grow crops in more than just one region. Like we need this opposition, we need this polarity between light and dark. And Neptune really brings all of that and like pulls the veil back on like what is the battle that we're waging here, and more to come on that, right? Like we haven't had a Neptune transit of Aries since the 1800s. It takes 160 some years for Neptune to go around. So this Neptune through Aries transit will be the first of its kind for anybody who's alive on the planet. So this is definitely something to look forward to and to be ready for, that the North Node going through Aries is preparing us for this handoff that'll happen in March of 2025, right there at the Pisces Aries border. And then we also have in 2025 in May, so a couple months after Neptune gets into Aries, then here comes Saturn to make its every 30-year trip through Aries. So from May of 2025 through April of 2028, we'll have Saturn moving through Aries. So the first few years of Neptune in Aries, which is 14 years, by the way, I forgot to mention that, it'll be March of 2025 through March of 2039. It's hard to even imagine that I'm saying numbers like that right now, but so for the first few years of 2025 through 2028, we'll have Neptune and Saturn working their way through Aries together. And Saturn is very different from Neptune. Saturn is very much the definition of the physical world, like the limitations and the structures and the physical laws that govern our 3D experience. That's very much Saturn, where Neptune is the mystical, the beyond the veil part of our experience. Our intuition is very much part of Neptune. The part that, our higher self and our spiritual support can see on our path, but they're keeping it veiled so that we in our physical can't see. That veil, that limit of what's in the physical and what exists, is very much the intersection of Saturn and Neptune. So the fact that we have them both working together through the later part of the 2020s is very interesting. All of that happening right on the heels of this North Node transit through Aries. So here we've already, done a lot to contemplate this Aries Libra energy, the North Node building Aries and the South Node purging in Libra. We've started to contemplate that and we have done awesome work here so far. So let's all take a second and pat ourselves on the back. This is a lot. This is a lot to get to chew through, and it's so fun to get to cover it with you guys. So if you're enjoying it, take a second and like the video, share your comments down below. I love getting to hear from you guys. I do have another video that I'm yet to make, so if you do have any questions about this transit, I'd be happy to bake that into the last video in this series and any others that I decide to make along the way as we go through this. So with that, though, we'll get into the beginning of the deep dive, and we'll leave the rest of the deep dive for that next video, like I said. So developing Aries energy. Let's take a second and very, very specifically sink down into our Aries energy. Like I said, we're all 12 of the zodiac archetypes, so we all have Aries energy somewhere in our chart. And even if we don't have any planets in Aries, like for example, I don't, if you count asteroids, I have a couple of asteroids there, but I have no planets in Aries. So even if you don't have any planets in Aries, you can still look to the Mars in your chart. So Mars is the ruler of Aries. We're going to talk more about that in the deep dive. Um, but that really shows your personal Aries energy, wherever your Mars sign is and the house that that's in. So, for example, I have a Pisces Mars in the 12th house. So, kind of as far away from Aries as you can possibly get as far as what is my warrior style. I'm a mermaid who mostly is going to swim away from you if you try to have a confrontation with me. And if I have to, I'm going to like zap you with some kind of like universal leverage to, not like indirectly have somebody else say what it is that I need said versus like again me having to directly confront anything. But that works for me, like our unique Mars energy, the way that we assert ourselves, the way that we understand our sense of self and the way that we relate to our life. That is on purpose, the same as the rest of our natal chart. So you can understand your Aries energy a little bit more that way too. But for the sake of this conversation, I really want to take a few keywords related to Aries and get us started in this deep dive. I would also love to hear what are your favorite Aries keywords down below. So when it comes to developing Aries energy, really like this is that spark of life. So one key word for Aries is living, and the sheer selfishness to survive. Like, aggression, for example, is something that, especially in modern civilized society, we're not rewarded for being aggressive in modern times. And yet, that doesn't mean that we don't still possess aggression. And aggression is another one that goes along with living because there are limited resources on this planet. So if you're going to survive, you do have to be willing to take. You have to be willing to pick the fruit off the vine and eat it for yourself, meaning it's not going to be there for somebody else to come along and eat it. So the selfishness to survive, the selfishness to live, the selfishness to let yourself live is all very tied up in Aries and kind of like giving into what it is that your heart is pulling you towards over and over. Those sparks keep guiding you in that direction. Another keyword for Aries is courage. And with that, I would automatically tie together risk. So, risk and courage. And the idea of courage, very specifically, is not that you're fearless. Like, that is not the case with Aries energy or Mars. It's not that they're not afraid, it's that the desire to act is this big and the fear is only this big. So the desire to have the thing is bigger and more compelling than the fear around the thing, and that equals courage. So, how bad do you want it? Is really the question that comes with Aries energy, and with courage specifically. Like, if I'm afraid and I feel like my fear is holding me back, courage is the answer. And how do you get your courage going? You figure out, why is it that I want this? Back to my state officer story, I had a very clear piece that I wanted out of that experience. And I think being so clear about the piece that was in it for me really helped to keep my fear at bay as I went through that process, and let me pull on my courage, because I can get through all of these other things because I'm going to get to have this. So, yes, when we think about taking a risk or stepping outside of our comfort zone or going to war, we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Yes, that's a vulnerable place to be. Coming into life itself, being a baby, is a vulnerable place to be. And we all have to go through that incredibly vulnerable stage in order to grow strong enough into a self sufficient creature that can protect itself, that can provide for its needs. And that, again, the vulnerability is worth it. The risk is worth it. And if the risk isn't worth it, if you're looking at it like, yeah, there's really nothing in this for me, I'm going to put myself out there, and for what? Then don't do it. That's where I'm saying, like, somebody else can't tell you that this is a good idea. You have to be able to come to that realization inside of yourself. But sometimes there is incredible risk, there's incredible potential for harm, and it's so worth it that you would give your life to the cause. You would pay the ultimate price. The ultimate risk is death. And when we get into the warrior archetype, especially, like, we don't have a whole lot of warriors in today's day and age. I mean, some people sign up for the military, but in the grand scheme of our total global population, I got to think it's pretty small. But there was a time back in the day where we all were kind of up against that, paying the ultimate price. And where where is it that we want to dedicate our life to, is the question. And I think, like, lately I've been inspired to be watching the Hunger Games movies. I've watched through the series a few times now in the last month or two. And there's actually two different scenes in the Mockingjay, part one, where that's like the third movie in the four-part series. And there's two different scenes where, like, the districts are realizing that the capital is never going to treat them fairly, and that, like, they're just going to keep, getting the shit end of the stick, and they're ready to fight back. They're ready to fight for their own rights. They're ready to fight for a better quality of life than what the measly little scraps that the capital is giving them. They're ready to fight because they don't want to continue on with the status quo in the way that it was. And so the two different scenes, granted this is a fictional movie, but take from it the energetic themes here. Like, the two scenes in the movie, the one is when they blow up the dam. And if you've ever seen the movie, like, basically there's like these different access points onto the dam, and the peacekeepers, the guards, are like really guarding each of these different access points to the dam. And there's, like, up high, there's people, like, guarding this. They're, like, down on the ground, they're guarding it. And so all of these guards are armed. And the plan that they enacted, the group of the people from the districts, they got together in their numbers, all with their individual willingness to pay this ultimate price. And they had bombs that were in these giant wood boxes that took like 3 or 4 people to carry these boxes. And they got those boxes inside a big group of people, and they, like, have the 3 or 4 people carrying them, and they all just charge together as a group. And when the guards start firing, these people on the front lines, they go down, and even some of the people carrying the boxes, they go down, and other people grab the boxes and they charge. And eventually there's still enough people that they overpower the guards. They put the boxes inside the dam and they blow up the dam, thus killing the power grid for all of the districts and the capital. And not everybody survived that mission, is really the takeaway. And I'm not advocating at all for, like, go devote your life to some, like, extreme cause. But, like, think about, why would somebody do that? Why would somebody join a team where we're going to do this thing that you may or may not even live to see us, like, reap the rewards and, like, harvest the fruit from these actions? Like, you may not even get to enjoy it. Why would somebody do that? Why? I mean, it's a really deep question that I think each of us personally can spend some time with over these next 18 months. The other, the other scene is basically the same. It's in the forest where like the tree people, um, they do their little signal and then they all run and a bunch of them go down in the firing or whatever, but the rest of them who are able to draw the guards on in and they climb up the trees and they set off a bomb that like blows up all the guards. And so there's there's definitely things that are worth fighting for. There are things that are worth paying the ultimate price. And I personally, in my life, I can't really think of one. I can't really think of a cause that I would give my life to, where I would put my life in danger to make sure that this thing happened. But I don't know, like maybe that's something that's going to be presented to us, or maybe there's some lesser version of that kind of idea where, we're putting our reputation on the line, or we're putting our family relationships and our sense of social safety, we're putting that on the line. So there could be other risks that we're taking in terms of, you know, blowing up bridges, quite literally. Like what a lot of people did during the George Floyd protests in that summer of 2020, where basically it became clear that staying silent is racism. Like either you're going to be anti-racist, like you're going to condemn people who hold these views, you're going to blow up bridges with the racist ones, or you're as good as the racists themselves. And it is this like official polarization of pick a side and blow up the bridge to the other side, make a stand, declare who you are and what you stand for beyond the playing politics and playing nice and playing all sides so that I can stay friends with this one and this one and this one and this one and all these different people. It's like at this point during this particular cycle, developing Aries energy, we are being asked to lean into which which facet. If you had to pick one, and I know coming from the Libra end, that's so hard to think about, especially when you can. Like one of the highest frequencies of Libra is that you can see all the sides of things. And picking one is extra hard the more sides you can see, but this Aries North Node is begging us to pick one. Pick a side and devote yourself to it. Take a risk on behalf of the side that you're picking. And we do that risk, we take that risk, we muster our courage because it's worth it. There's one more piece that I want to share with you to kind of close out this initial deep dive into the developing Aries energy side. This was something that I channeled through one of my morning time journaling sessions. And it is like going along with this idea of what risks are you willing to take and what what are you willing to risk and for what? And it was like this clearing away of all the noise and this understanding, this deep understanding of like I was talking about in the first video, sit around the fire, like this inner ember that is like literally sacred within each one of us. And it came to me, this is me talking about me in this new understanding, that the precious is worth it. The precious is worth it. You will not speak to precious that way. You will respect the precious. And that was me talking to me. That was me telling myself that I will respect myself. I will respect my sovereignty and my sacredness. I will hold those things with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. And I will lead everyone around me in showing them, demonstrating through my own behavior how it is that you will treat the precious. So thank you for letting me share that. I absolutely, it cracks me up. The precious is worth it. You will not speak to the precious that way. You will respect the precious. And it was like my inner parent on behalf of my inner child, like really having my back in that instance. So with the North Node, we talked about this a little bit in my Taurus North Node video, like that I released for that chapter. But to bring it back in here too, like this Aries North Node journey of stepping more into your own divine inner essence and respecting yourself more and giving more weight to your own opinion as far as what is right and fair and good for you. Um, in doing all of that, we are all as a collective leaning into our own Aries energy, but really for you personally, this Aries North Node chapter is playing its part in preparing you to step more fully into your own North Node placement. So that's where, again, I go back to what sign is it in? What house is it in? What aspects are it making? I recommended a couple books in that first video that you might like to check out. Um, and there's a song here that I'll leave you with for this section that's on the playlist that I mentioned called Dare You to Move by Switchfoot. And the lyrics specifically that want to come through here are I dare you to move like today never happened. Today never happened before. And there can be so many times where, especially in life, we learn. We learn that when we do certain things, the world responds to us in a certain way, and we get it in our head that we know exactly what the consequences are. And this song and this North Node transit, here's what I can see it as far as like energetically. It's like the old consequences, the old ways of the world responding to us, the gates are opening and it's time to move forward. So even trying things that we've tried before and failed at before, that doesn't mean that we're not maybe ready to do it now. That maybe the precious is grown up enough to like, maybe it's time to do it now, precious. Maybe the self respect that you're going to give your precious is about letting them take a risk that you previously would have thought wasn't safe, but you're going to bet on yourself. And so that leap forward is actually happening in your own personal North Node journey. So look there for more context on this process. So next, we will begin our deep dive into the Libra energy side and healing our Libra energy with the South Node making its transit there. And so Libra is represented by the scales, and the main piece of the scales that I think is a good first piece to lay down here is that it's the only object. So like every other one of the zodiac signs is represented by either an animal or a human. And Libra is the only one that is represented by an inanimate object. And so that really says a lot in the symbolism about how emotionally detached Libra is. It's an air sign, so I mean, all the air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, are all emotionally detached, but Libra especially is powerfully committed to that detachment as a means, as a mechanism for finding the balancing point between any two things. So Libra is that mechanism of the scales that says, I don't care if you're an ounce of gold or an ounce of lead, I can find the point where they both weigh an ounce and they're equal. And so that really is a beautiful side to our energy. I absolutely love Libra energy and want to lay that down there as far as, again, when we think about the South Node, there's two different sides. One, where we're wanting to heal any of the damaging sides of having that energy overdeveloped, but two, we can really embrace the superpowers and the abilities that come to us because we have such well-developed energy in that area. And so, what are the pieces that are like the talents that come with highly developed Libra energy? I would say one of the main ones is keeping the peace. Libra is a very peaceful energy, again, a lot because of that emotional detachment and because of that point of fairness. It's civil, it's like kind of the basis of civilization, like the court of law of the scales of justice, of weighing out here was the action, and so here's going to be the effect of that action that you took. It's fair and it's balanced. Um, the legal system in general is part of that. Lawyers are part of that. That's where again we see the Libra signification of the devil's advocate. That like, you know, especially in the U.S. court system, we have a right to an attorney. We have a right to be considered innocent until we're proven guilty. So every single person, no matter how damning the evidence, deserves a fair trial and deserves to have their day in court, deserves to have their representation, somebody to fight for them on their side. And so these are typically very beautiful notions, and I'm not saying that they're not, but I do see where, because we're overlaying the South Node, overdeveloped shadow aspects on top of this, we can see where you get into over compromise, we get into a bias towards fairness where, you know, really are these two things equal, or is one of them more appropriate, more applicable to this time? We see where we can get lost in considering the perspectives and the vantage point. Like essentially, we become an 8 billion sided scale where we're trying to balance the balance point out of everyone and everything ever. And so then we get stuck in this kind of like analysis paralysis space where endless analysis, no action forward. And so that's the downside to harmony, is that the status quo, you can harmonize on a shitty status quo and like nothing gets better. And we have this same shit sandwich for lunch every single day, like going back to the Hunger Games. Like eventually, just because it's balanced and harmonious and like this is what somebody has deemed as fair, what happens when you no longer agree with that? And I don't think this is fair. And I know you're telling me that this is my place and this is what I'm supposed to do, but I'm feeling something inside of me that says I deserve more than this. And so, where are we accepting less than our fair share because we're falling into that Libra shadow of playing the social politics and being overly diplomatic, being the charmer who is so likable by every single person. And so maybe, yeah, you can make friends with lots of people and you can get along with lots of people, but are you living your soul's mission in the middle of all of that? Maybe, maybe you are. And there's no way of knowing, right? This is a general video and like every single person's doing their own thing, but that that charmer personality can also be papering over a wound of social rejection that we personally were hurt by being rejected socially, either within our family or school or something. And because of that pain of social rejection, we now have a fear of social rejection. We want to avoid social rejection at all costs because we don't want another wound like that one. And now we're playing the charmer. We're putting on our mask of being likable and lovable for everyone. And we're doing that because we don't want to risk the pain of social rejection. And that's where, again, that shadow side of Libra is asking for us to grow in our Aries courage. That, like, even if we're afraid of social rejection, like, for example, I had an experience early on in the Taurus North Node cycle where I did experience a very, very mean social rejection. They were very unkind. But I realized in it that I'm okay with that because what I was doing was speaking out against slavery, speaking out against racism, and using any of those kinds of, the color of our skin or whatever to make decisions about how to treat people, about what people are worth. That I was speaking out against this and talking about how, basically the foundation of the United States, the foundation of our country. This was in the Pluto return video for the US. The foundation of our country is built on slavery. So systemic racism exists in the foundation, in the bones, in the pillars, in the tissue, the fabric of what our country is. It's rotten from the inside out, is the only way I can say that. And keep a straight face because that's what I feel is true. And so the comment that I got, and I was nervous putting this out there. I like as a disclaimer, I was very nervous because these are controversial viewpoints. This is what I'm talking about with like burn the bridge with the other side. Like I'm taking a stand and I'm saying racism is wrong. I'm not trying to play nice and wear my mask of diplomacy. If you're a racist, like no, I think I do have an issue with that. And I think this is worth standing up for. And so in that US Pluto return video, I was very transparent about what I thought. And someone responded with a whole comment that I might even put it on the screen here. I don't know. We'll let editing Carly decide that. But it was robust, and it was an attack about how dare you? How dare you say these things? How dare you put this on me? How dare you blah, 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 blah. And as I read this person's complaint, I realized I don't care. I don't care that you think that about me. I'm okay with you not liking me. I'm okay with you being mad at me about this because this is worth it. This is something that I feel so strongly in my bones that I am not willing to play nice about this. This is something that is too important to let it get lost in the bias of fairness that says the racist perspective is equal to mine. And, in a human perspective, in a human experiment like what this earth is, yes, we are all entitled to our viewpoint, and I would never take anybody's viewpoint away from them. What I'm talking about is no longer playing small because you're worried about pissing off somebody who sees things completely differently than you do. Like, I'm not going to tell the racists they're wrong and you can't do what you're doing over there, but I'm also going to stop being controlled by having to keep my opinion in a likable place. I'm going to be more honest about what I think about the world and how I see things. And if there are people who do not like that and who feel that they have to disconnect from me as a result of that, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I'm no longer willing to have a codependent relationship with the whole freaking world where I can't piss off anybody. It's like that was where I was living before that. And that moment of having a racist be mad at me for my anti-racist viewpoint, I realized like, wow, yeah, this isn't even close to as scary as I thought it was. I'm okay with it. I'm okay that that rubbed her the wrong way. I think that's probably for the best. So like there can be value in the conflict. There can be value in something that is confronting and harsh and rubs up against and creates this friction so that there can be a spark, so that something new that does not exist already, something new can be brought to life and can ignite within the individual, yes, but then also that fire spreads through mass consciousness. So each of us ourselves during this transit, you know, there's a quote that I really love that says, "We all wear masks, and the time comes when we cannot remove them without removing some of our own skin." And that's by Andre Berth. It's on the screen. Bless you for not holding me responsible for pronouncing your name. Um, yeah, I see that that could be some of the darker sides of this Libra South Node, is that as you go to take off the masks that you've been wearing, that some of your skin comes off with it. And what I mean by that is like you do lose relationships because you realize, in my example, you realize this didn't happen, but like, for example, that like your best friend is a closet racist and they're the one that gets mad at you when you come out with your anti-racist viewpoint. So like when you start owning who you are and you start living from this place of your inner fire, you never know who it is that's going to have the problem. And sometimes it's like not who you would expect. And so losing certain people out of your life is most likely going to be a natural byproduct of this transit. That's something that I didn't really notice the first time, where it was the difference between high school and college. It made sense that I lost almost everybody out of my life and I went to college and had like all new people there in my life. So it'll be interesting to see how that part plays out, the shift of who is present in your life and what is that relationship based on. The song that I want to leave you with here on this part is one of my absolute favorites. Talk about a song I have listened to on repeat for hours. It is called The Good Parts by Andy Grammer, and it is basically this summarizing this Libra South Node transit, where there are so many times where our social intelligence holds us back. We know what's taboo and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and like what they want to hear from us and what they don't want to hear from us. And that social intelligence, it causes us to then express and present a curated picture, Libra and art, a curated picture of who we think people want to see, not who we are. And so that song, The Good Parts by Andy Grammer, is on the playlist for when you need a little bit extra boost to be the real you, and you never know who's waiting to fall in love with that authentic self that you spent so long hiding away because you thought it was inappropriate. So here we are on the home stretch of the second video in this series, and I want to spend this last little bit talking about, so what do you get when you combine Aries and Libra, when you have that axis? Like I said, we're not pulling in this direction and this direction, all going in our own ways, but like what happens when you turn them both towards the same thing and then you start moving in tandem, getting the best of both of those worlds? And I think what you get is a sense of cosmic justice, a sense of devoting your individual life force towards what is fair and what matters and what is right, not what the culture says is right, or what the status quo says is right, or what the Constitution says is right, or like any of that. None of that is our expert source. Our inner fire is our expert source. Our inner fire will guide us towards cosmic justice more faithfully than civilization ever could hope to do, because civilization is an average of all the individual parts. Our own sense of cosmic justice is a personally felt experience that through this transit we are getting better acquainted with. We are getting better acquainted at the wrongs of civilization that we personally just cannot live with. We cannot live with that anymore, and that we personally are willing to burn a couple bridges if it means righting some of these injustices in the world. There's also this idea between Aries and Libra of leadership. And I think like it's a leadership axis, and there's two very different ways of leading. There's the Aries way and the Libra way. The Libra way leads through, asking everybody else's opinions and group consensus, and, really trying to create a harmony and include all of the disparate pieces between the group, bringing everyone together and unifying all of the different pieces into the whole. And that's a beautiful way to lead, and I'm not saying it's not. And then there's the Aries way, who says that, it's very unapologetic in its fire. It says, I don't need anybody else to be in harmony with me. I know I have the right answer. I know I have the right answer because I can feel it burning inside of me. It's pulling me. It is eating away. The fire licks away at myself from the inside out, and I can't not do this. And that kind of leadership is something very different altogether, because there is such courage, I think, in that more than anything else, because we're not waiting on a bunch of people to co-sign what it is that we want. We're not waiting on a bunch of other people to agree that, yes, that is the right way. And in a lot of ways, like, it'd be really hard to have a government based on, the Aries form of leadership, where every single person is like going in their own direction. Like, that there needs to be an element of harmony. But I do think that the piece that we're developing with this Aries North Node transit around leadership is realizing the value and the importance of our personal example. That, like, your example, aka your life, aka your masterpiece, the choices that you have made that have made your life what it is, that those choices, that example of you, the masterpiece that is you, is leading by example, whether you say another word to another human being or not. So just even the way we make our choices, the way we choose to be in the world, do you choose to vocalize your controversial opinion, or do you keep it to yourself because I don't want to piss people off? Like, that choice of, do you let yourself say the thing or do you hold yourself back? You're leading by example in that moment. And so I want to ask you to kind of wrap up this very first, the first overview, and then we'll get into the deep dive in the next video. But I want to ask you, what kind of lead do you want to set? You think about your kids maybe, or your friends, or the people that are most important to you in this world. What kind of example do you hope for them to follow? Do you want them to hold themselves back out of, overly diplomatic fear of upsetting other people, or do you want them to go after their dreams and chase their passions and let themselves live a life of what they're desiring? And we can't make anybody else do anything, but we can influence them through our example. We can set a lead that shows them what's possible. And from there, they can make whatever choice they can live with. But we can play our part by choosing how we are going to navigate within ourselves. And what kind of a leader do you want to be? What kind of an example do you want to set? Those are huge, huge questions. And for that, I leave you with the song, I Don't Have the Answers by We Are the Messengers. I absolutely love that song when I'm spinning inside of a question that feels really important to answer, but I don't have the answer. And basically, the gist of that one is I don't have the answers, and maybe that's okay. Some of these questions are meant to sink down inside of us and to germinate through our life experiences. We're not necessarily meant to just know the answer, versus, especially Aries being an extremely action-oriented sign, will be shown the answer. So I think even if you aren't really sure what kind of a leader you are, I don't really know. I do think that by the end of this transit, we will have been shown, and we will have a much more solid idea of who we are in the world. What is our example wanting to show as far as what's possible? What kind of lead are we trying to set? Dear friends, thank you so much for joining me for this in-depth overview. This isn't even the deep dive, guys. I got like a whole nother thing coming for you there. Coming at you soon. Sooner than later. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to do this video this fast, but here we are. I would love to hear from you down below. What stood out to you? What are you still curious about? What didn't quite land? What could I do better explaining? I really appreciate you guys taking the time to like this video, to subscribe so you don't miss any of the other uploads I'm doing, and taking a second to comment. Those all mean a lot to me. If you would like to interact with me further, and if you're wanting to expand your spiritual community in your world, I highly encourage you to check out my Patreon, where you can gain access to a monthly spiritual conversation that I host. It's very informal, a different topic each time, very reflective of whatever the current energies are of the soup that we're all sitting in. And it can be incredibly cup filling and affirming to know that you're not alone in what you're going through, that we're all in this together. So, especially as we step outside of our comfort zones and we start taking greater risks in expressing ourselves and our authenticity, it becomes that much more important to be surrounded by people who get what you're doing, who are encouraging you in that inner fire. And the Owning Authenticity Patreon may be one such space that you want to check out for that in your world. So thank you so much again for joining me. It has been my absolute pleasure to continue this conversation with you. Until next time, I do hope that you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.